And I just wonder if this provokes any thoughts for you, Candy, about Washington and insider versus outsider.
Well, as you know, when people run these days, you're always an outsider. Ronald Reagan, in his second term after 4 years as president, ran as an outsider. It is the way to get into Washington, particularly as you get further and further west of the Mississippi, or for that matter, west of Washington. So that is, Mr. Smith is the template for who these politicians want to be. But the problem is that what the authenticity that Capitol was showing is what now, once you pretend to be someone else, you kind of lose your authenticity. And that's, that it has become something that politicians compare themselves to. Tells you how far we have come to, in some ways, the Washington that was in that film. I was sitting there watching it today with you all, thinking, well, here's what's different. First of all, I've never seen the Senate floor unless it's a really, really big vote, and I think the last time I saw the Senate floor that full, with people actually sitting in their seats, which they don't do, was for the impeachment vote. That was the last time I saw them sit. Actually, Iraq War, they might have also, the first Gulf War, they might have also all been in their seats to vote. But it is very much what that view, even though Washington did not have that view of themselves at the time, and that's why they were so upset with this picture. You would not surprise any politician in Washington today that is how outside the Beltway they are viewed. I mean, I can't go anywhere that people don't say, oh, they're all corrupt and they're all out for themselves and they're greedy and the money people get into the White House to see the president or bowl in his bowling alley or whatever it is. So it's almost as though that kind of caricature of Washington is so steeped in politics now, and that is how it is viewed. People don't think it's a caricature anymore. Having covered Capitol Hill for a very long time, the one thing I think that surprises people is when I say the more I get to know most of these politicians, actually the more I admire them, because they are more like Mr. Smith than you would imagine. They are not all corrupt. They all do come with a certain amount of idealism, with a certain amount of, the freshmen come with a certain amount of wow when they come to the Capitol. And certainly there's something about any system, whether you're in the news media or that over time you develop a certain sense of cynicism. But there are people, there are many politicians who come with the idea of doing good. Sometimes things happen along the way. Mostly I think what happens is you find so many of them leaving now. You find them thinking, it's why they like going and being governors, because they can actually affect something where they feel somewhat helpless sometimes in the Senate and in the House. So it occurred to me how much of Mr. Smith there really is sort of hidden in a lot of these politicians that I've covered. I think there's a senator named John Tester who came out of Montana. He's a rancher. I went up to interview him because he was running again. It looked like a really tough race for him. He's a Democrat. Montana's not, hasn't been a particularly Democratic territory. And I said, listen, I thought we'd come up, and he said, well, it's harvest time between, September and this time, and so I can't do it then. And I thought, whoa, well, we've got to go see this guy, because I've never had someone turn down a national interview from Montana because it's harvest time. So, and he very much came, and he and his wife very much came with, and I'm assuming still retain that kind of sense of I'm going to go back. I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna speak for Montana, but then I'm gonna go back to my home, because what I really am is a rancher. So I think there are a lot of Mr. Smith wannabes who come with that kind of idealistic, holy cow, look where I am. And I think that's the other thing in the movie that really struck me is every once in a while, will walk through the Capitol and listen to the tourists as they're getting their tour and how awed they are by the things that we breeze by every day. I don't drive into the Capitol every day, even though I go by the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument. I work in the Capitol. You don't notice it after time. And I think that when people first come, when these lawmakers first come, they have that sense, but there's something about the system that tends to bring it out of them.
That's really interesting. And the other very Washington characteristic of the film is, of course, the filibuster. And I wonder if you seen filibusters, because they actually don't happen that often.
They don't. It's a threat of the filibuster now. Nobody wants to hang out and stand on the Senate floor for,
Right.
and try to outweight the opposition. So what they do is say, we're going to filibuster this, and they'll pull the bill from the floor and wait until they fix whatever it is that's prompting the filibuster. They'll wait till that gets fixed. So there's a lot of negotiations behind closed doors, but I have not seen. I'm not even, I have to go back and look, but we know there were filibusters during the civil rights legislation.
Right. And these were Southerners who wanted to stop the civil rights legislation.
Right.
We have the idea that the filibuster is sort of the last refuge of the principled politician to stop that corrupt bill, but in fact, during the civil rights movement, it was the opposite.
Right, exactly. And the filibuster now is sort of the code word for that. When you ever hear someone talk about how the Senate can't get closer, that means they can't stop a filibuster. They don't have the magic 60 votes. So if they cannot get closer, they tend to pull a bill or run around looking for the other 60th vote because of the threat of the filibuster. But I've never seen a real filibuster. We've seen Senate leaders say, we're going to stay here until this gets done.
Bring out the cots.
Yeah, exactly. Bring the cots out because we need this budget. But not a real filibuster. It doesn't fit into. Legislation has now become sort of a national, something you can watch, and I think that they're not that crazy about having people watch what can be very messy if they're, particularly after 24 hours standing on your feet, all kinds of things get said. I think no one's real anxious.
That's a good thought.